Hello, night listener, and welcome to Little Nightmare. I'm Emma, and tonight I'll be keeping you company to help you fall asleep. But before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. Story 1. The Thread That Binds. Every day, the routine unfolds with a rhythmic certainty that feels both comforting and disconcerting. It begins with the gentle chime resonating through the air, 3 distinct notes, each precisely spaced apart, each echoing through the walls like a soft, familiar murmur. The first time, I dismissed it as a curious quirk of the old building. Now, its unwavering precision gnaws at the edges of my thoughts. By the time the third chime fades, the patterned wallpaper has caught my eye again, a small, crimson thread dangling from the seam where it never quite met the ceiling. Always that thread, swaying lightly as if stirred by an unseen hand. In the silence that follows, the weight of anticipation presses against my temples, urging me to move, to alter just one detail in this strange, looping ritual. Yet each attempt to veer from this path is met with resistance that feels almost physical. My hand hesitates as it reaches for the frayed string, compelled to pull it, compelled to leave it be. Time wades through a heavy, reluctant pause, dragging me with it, and I am left to wonder if tomorrow will finally break the cycle, or if I am destined to chase its echo once more. There was a room once, or perhaps there still is. The memory shifts like water through my fingers, leaving only impressions, wooden floors that creaked in a specific pattern, the scent of vanilla and something metallic underneath. I remember reaching for a doorknob that felt warm, too warm, as if someone had been gripping it from the other side. The chimes begin again, though the clock on the wall shows no face, only hands moving in directions that shouldn't exist. I write these words on paper that feels rough beneath my fingertips, each letter forming with deliberate care. When I look up, the thread has moved closer to the center of the wall. The radio sits silent on the shelf, its cord unplugged and coiled like a sleeping snake. Yet, I hear it speaking not words, but tones that rise and fall with the rhythm of breathing. The voice sounds familiar, though I cannot place it. It whispers about patterns, about threads that connect all things, about the weight of repetition. My pen moves across the page without my conscious direction. The words appear. The floor is learning your footsteps. I read them twice, 3 times, before the meaning settles into my bones. The wooden planks beneath my feet pulse with a gentle warmth, as if blood flows through their grain. There's a note tucked between the pages of a book I don't remember opening. The handwriting looks like mine, but the slant is wrong, the pressure too heavy. It reads, "You are not alone in this room." When I blink and look again, the words have shifted. This room is not alone in you. The wallpaper breathes. The pattern expands and contracts with subtle movements that make my eyes water when I try to focus. The crimson thread dances without wind, and I realize I've been holding my breath for longer than seems possible. I smell roses, though no flowers exist here. The scent triggers a flash of memory, or perhaps a vision of hands arranging petals in a perfect circle. The hands look like mine, but move with someone else's precision. The roses turn to ash between the fingers, leaving stains that won't wash away. The pen in my hand grows heavier. Words flow onto the paper in handwriting that shifts between familiar and foreign. The walls remember everything you've forgotten. The ink bleeds into the fibers, creating patterns that mirror the wallpaper's design. Footsteps echo from the room above, though I know this building has no second floor. The sound is rhythmic, deliberate, tracing the same path over and over. 3 steps forward, pause. 3 steps back. The pattern matches the chimes, matches the sway of the thread, matches the beating of my heart. I write. Someone else is writing these words. The sentence completes itself before I realize my hand has stopped moving. The letters appear in real time, flowing from an invisible source. My reflection in the window shows me holding a pen, but the motion doesn't align with the words appearing on the page. The room shifts. The same 4 walls, the same furniture, but everything has moved 3 inches to the left. The thread now dangles directly above my chair. The radio has turned to face me, though its cord remains unplugged. The book lies open to a page that was blank before, now filled with my handwriting words I've never written. You've been here before, the page declares in my own script. You'll be here again. The ink is still wet, though I haven't touched pen to paper. My fingers are stained with colors that don't exist in this room. Light enters through the window at an impossible angle, casting shadows that move independently of their sources. The shadow of the thread creates a perfect spiral on the opposite wall, though the thread itself hangs straight. My own shadow gestures while I sit motionless, pointing toward corners of the room that seem to contain more space than they should. The chimes sound, but this time I count 4 notes instead of 3. The extra note lingers, vibrating through the floorboards and into my chest. My heartbeat adjusts to match its frequency, and I realize I've been breathing in sync with the wallpaper's subtle movements. I find myself writing in a journal I don't remember starting. The pages are filled with observations in my handwriting, documenting details I've never noticed. The ceiling is exactly 13 inches higher at night. The thread casts no shadow during the 4th chime. The radio plays memories instead of music. When I turn back to the first page, the handwriting has changed. The words remain the same, but the formation of each letter belongs to someone else. Someone who knows my thoughts well enough to write them in their own style. The room repeats. Same walls, same thread, same chimes, but I am different. My reflection shows a face I almost recognize, features slightly rearranged like furniture shifted in the night. The voice that emerges when I speak aloud carries unfamiliar inflections, as if someone else is borrowing my vocal cords. I write, the pattern is breaking me down, but the words appear as, I am breaking down the pattern. The contradiction doesn't disturb me as much as it should. Both statements feel equally true, equally false. The thread has grown longer, now reaching the floor. When I touch it, images flash through my mind, other rooms, other people sitting in this same chair, reaching for this same thread. Their faces blur together until I can't distinguish them from my own reflection. My pen moves without guidance. You are the 37th iteration. The number means nothing and everything. I feel the weight of 36 other minds that have occupied this space, this chair, this endless loop of chimes and threads and impossible geometry. The walls pulse with a heartbeat that isn't mine. The radio speaks in my voice, though I'm not speaking. It recounts memories I've never lived, experiences that feel familiar despite their impossibility. The book's pages turn themselves, revealing stories written in languages I understand without knowing. I am writing and being written simultaneously. The pen in my hand moves with my intention, but the words that appear serve another purpose, another mind that thinks through mine. The boundary between observer and observed dissolves, like sugar in rain. The room has returned to where everything began, but I no longer recognize the person who first noticed the chimes. The thread hangs motionless, no longer crimson, but colorless, like light before it learns to bend. The wallpaper's pattern has simplified into basic geometric shapes that hurt to perceive directly. My handwriting has stabilized into something clean and detached. The words flow with mechanical precision. The cycle completes. The pattern resets. Another mind will occupy this chair, reach for this thread, count these chimes. The radio crackles to life without power, broadcasting the beginning of a story about routine and certainty, about threads that dangle from impossible heights, about the weight of repetition that presses against temples like familiar hands. I set down the pen and stand, though I don't remember deciding to move. The chair waits empty, patient, ready for the next iteration of consciousness to discover the rhythm that binds all things together. The chimes begin again, 3 notes precisely spaced, echoing through walls that remember everything and nothing, preparing to welcome another mind into the endless dance of thread and pattern, and the beautiful, terrible certainty of return. Story 2. I watch her through the gap in my curtains every morning. The woman across the street follows the same ritual 7 steps from her door to the mailbox. Pause, 3 steps back, pause again. Her movements are precise, measured, like she's counting something invisible in the air between us. The first few days, I told myself it was coincidence. People develop habits. But there's something else, something in the way she tilts her head before turning back to her house, as if she's listening to instructions only she can hear. My coffee grows cold as I observe her routine. The steam stops rising from the cup, and I realize I've been standing here longer than I intended. The woman has already disappeared inside, but I can still see the impression of her footsteps in the morning frost. Perfectly aligned dots leading nowhere. I start keeping notes, not because I'm obsessed, but because patterns fascinate me. The way she always wears the same gray coat, how her hand hovers over the mailbox for exactly the same duration before opening it. Even when there's nothing inside, and there never is, she performs the motion with religious dedication. The notebook fills slowly. Page after page of observations, sketches of her movements, attempts to decode the rhythm of her steps. 7 forward, 3 back. Always 7, always 3. I begin counting along with her, my fingers tapping against the window glass in time with her footfalls. Something shifts in the 4th week of watching. She stops at the mailbox as usual, but this time she doesn't open it. Instead, she turns toward my house, not toward my window toward me. Her eyes find mine through the narrow gap in the curtains, and she smiles. I step back from the window, heart hammering. When I look again, she's gone. The mailbox stands open, though I never saw her touch it. That afternoon, I find myself walking past her house. Not intentionally, I was heading to the corner store, taking my usual route. But my feet slow as I approach her front yard, and I notice things I couldn't see from my window. The grass grows in perfect circles around her footpath. The mailbox post leans at an angle that seems impossible, defying gravity while remaining perfectly stable. Her front door is painted blue or green. I blink, and it's definitely blue again. I start leaving my house at different times, varying my route to the store. But somehow, I always end up walking past her house. The door color shifts each time I look at it blue, green, sometimes a shade that has no name, a color that makes my eyes water if I stare too long. The woman begins appearing in other places. Standing at the bus stop when I drive past, though no bus has run that route in months. Sitting on a bench in the park where I walk, always facing away from me, always wearing that gray coat. When I try to approach her, she's gone before I take 3 steps. 7 steps forward, 3 steps back. I find myself walking this pattern without realizing it. My feet have memorized her rhythm, and I catch myself counting under my breath as I move through my daily routines. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Turn. 3, 2, 1. Stop. The notebook changes. Pages I never wrote appear filled with my handwriting, describing conversations I never had, observations of things I never saw. Or did I see them? The memories feel real, but they don't belong to me. They belong to someone who watches from behind my eyes, someone who knows things I haven't learned yet. I stand at my window, but now I'm looking at my own house from across the street. The curtains are drawn, but I can see a figure standing behind them, watching. The figure raises its hand, and I feel my hand rise in response. We mirror each other perfectly, this watcher and I, separated by a distance that no longer seems to matter. The mailbox ritual continues, but I'm no longer sure who performs it. My feet know the path, 7 steps forward, 3 steps back, and my hand knows the weight of the empty mailbox. The cool metal handle that never quite feels the same temperature twice. Sometimes I'm watching from the window. Sometimes I'm walking the pattern. Sometimes I'm both and neither. The gray coat hangs in my closet now, though I don't remember buying it. It fits perfectly, the fabric soft against my skin, worn smooth by countless repetitions of the same movements. When I put it on, the world becomes clearer, more focused. The pattern makes sense. The counting becomes natural. 7 steps forward. The grass beneath my feet grows in perfect circles, and I understand why. Each step creates a ripple, a disturbance in something deeper than soil. The footprints I leave are not quite my own. They're too precise, too purposeful, belonging to someone who has walked this path much longer than I have. 3 steps back. The mailbox waits, always empty, always requiring the same ritual attention. My hand moves without my direction, opening the metal door, reaching inside to touch nothing, closing it again with a soft click that echoes longer than it should. The house across the street watches me through drawn curtains. Behind the window, a figure stands motionless, observing my movements with the same fascination I once felt. The figure takes notes, sketches my patterns, tries to decode the rhythm of my steps. 7 forward, 3 back. Always 7, always 3. I want to wave, to acknowledge this new watcher, but my hand won't obey. My body follows older instructions now, commands written in a language I'm still learning to speak. The ritual must be completed. The pattern must be maintained. The front door behind me is painted blue, or green, or that nameless color that shifts when observed directly. I don't turn to look at it anymore. I know what it is without seeing. Home is not a place, but a function, a point in the pattern where the watcher rests between observations. Inside, I remove the gray coat and hang it carefully in the closet. Tomorrow, someone else will wear it. Someone else will walk the 7 steps forward, 3 steps back. Someone else will stand at their window and watch, believing they are the observer rather than the observed. The notebook waits on the kitchen table. its pages blank and ready for new handwriting, new observations, new attempts to understand what cannot be understood. The pen rests beside it, warm to the touch, as if it has just been used by fingers that are not quite mine. I sit in the chair by the window and look across the street. The figure behind the curtains has begun to move, following a familiar pattern. 7 steps to one side, 3 steps back. The ritual adapts to smaller spaces, but its essence remains unchanged. The counting begins again, soft and rhythmic, a gentle percussion that matches the movement across the street. My lips don't move, but I hear my voice joining the count, adding to a chorus that has no beginning and no end. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Turn. 3, 2, 1. Stop. The pattern continues. It has always continued. It will always continue. I am the watcher now, and the watched, and the space between them where observation becomes transformation. The window reflects nothing, shows nothing, reveals nothing except the truth that there was never a difference between the observer and the observed. The gray coat waits in the closet. The notebook waits on the table. The pattern waits for tomorrow. Story 3. I sat at my desk, the faint hum of the world outside barely audible, as I reached for the silver lamp. Its familiar cold surface promised the soft glow I often craved during these quiet hours. The switch clicked with a reassuring sound, but this time it was followed by a second click, like an echo in perfect mimicry. The room seemed to pause, holding its breath as the light flickered gently, casting uncertain shadows that danced across the walls. I leaned closer, the persistent silence now thrumming with an unfamiliar undercurrent, as if the lamp were whispering secrets in a language just beyond my comprehension. That was when I first noticed the woman across the street. She stood perfectly still in her window, silhouetted against the pale light of her own room. Her posture was unnaturally rigid, arms at her sides, head tilted at a slight angle that made my neck ache just looking at her. The strange thing wasn't that she was their people stand in windows all the time. The strange thing was how the shadows in my room seemed to bend toward her, as if drawn by some invisible thread. I found myself watching her every evening after that. She appeared at the same window in the same position, with that same tilted head. The lamp's double click had become routine now, though I couldn't quite remember when it started happening every time. My fingers would find the switch, press it once, and then that second sound would follow like a loyal pet. The light would flicker in the same gentle rhythm, and there she would be, waiting. The woman never moved, not once. I began to keep notes, documenting her appearances with the methodical precision of a scientist. Her dress appeared to be dark blue, though the distance made it difficult to be certain. Sometimes it looked black. Sometimes it looked like no color at all, just an absence where fabric should be. Her hair fell straight down her back, perfectly smooth, perfectly still. Even on windy evenings when the trees outside swayed and bent, her hair remained motionless. I started adjusting my routine to observe her better. I moved my desk closer to the window, angling it so I could watch while pretending to work. The lamp came with me, its cord stretching taut across the room. The silver surface had grown warmer lately, though I couldn't recall turning up the heat. When I touched it now, it felt almost alive, pulsing with a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. Click, click. The double sound had become comforting, like a lullaby. The woman's window was directly across from mine, separated by a narrow street that seemed to grow narrower each evening. The distance between us felt negotiable, as if I could simply lean forward and touch the glass of her window instead of my own. I pressed my palm against the cool surface, leaving a handprint that fogged and faded in the lamplight. When I looked up, she was still there, still motionless, but something had changed. Her head was tilted the other way now. I blinked hard, certain I had imagined it. The woman's head tilted to the left, not the right. It had always tilted to the left. I checked my notes, flipping through pages of careful observations, but the words seemed to shift and blur under the lamp's glow. The handwriting looked different somehow, more angular, more deliberate. Had I always written with such sharp strokes? The paper felt rough beneath my fingers, though I was certain I had used smooth notebook pages. The silence in the room had developed texture. It pressed against my skin like velvet, soft but suffocating. I could feel it accumulating in the corners, growing heavier with each passing evening. The lamp's whisper had grown more distinct, though I still couldn't make out the words. Sometimes I caught myself leaning closer, straining to hear, my ear nearly touching the warm silver surface. The metal had begun to feel organic, yielding slightly under pressure like flesh. One evening, I decided to get a better look. I found a pair of binoculars in a drawer I didn't remember having, though they felt familiar in my hands. The weight was perfectly balanced. The focus rings smooth under my fingers. I raised them to my eyes and adjusted the view until the woman's window came into sharp detail. She was there, as always, but now I could see her face clearly. It was my face. No, that wasn't right. I lowered the binoculars and looked again with my naked eyes. The woman was just a silhouette, as she had always been. I raised the binoculars again, and there was my own face staring back, wearing the same tilted expression, the same dark dress that looked blue or black or like no color at all. My reflection's mouth was moving, forming words I couldn't hear, but somehow understood. She was telling me to come closer. I set the binoculars down with trembling hands. The silver lamp pulsed warmly beside me, its light casting my shadow across the wall in impossible directions. Click, click. The double sound echoed strangely now, as if coming from both sides of the glass. I looked at my window and saw the woman looking back, but she was inside my room now, standing behind my reflection. When I turned around, nothing was there but empty space and the sensation of being watched. The room had grown smaller. I was certain of it, though the walls appeared to be in the same places they had always been. The distance between my desk and the window had shortened, as if the space itself were contracting. The lamp's cord, which had been stretched taut across the room, now coiled loosely on the floor. The silver surface reflected not my face, but the face of the woman from the window. She was smiling now, though I had never seen her smile before. My notes had multiplied. Pages and pages of observations covered the desk, written in handwriting that shifted between my familiar script and something more angular, more precise. The words described things I didn't remember seeing. The woman stepping closer to her window each evening, her face becoming clearer, her mouth forming my name, though I had never told her what it was. Some entries were written from her perspective, describing the man across the street who watched her with such intensity, such need. The man who looked exactly like her. I tried to stop watching, but the lamp wouldn't let me. Each evening, my fingers found the switch without conscious thought. Click, click. The light would flicker, and there she would be, but closer now, always closer. Her window had moved across the street, or perhaps my window had moved to meet it. The glass surfaces were almost touching, separated by nothing but a breath of space that felt both infinite and non-existent. The woman's dress was definitely blue now, the same shade as the shirt I was wearing. Her hair fell in the same pattern as mine, her posture matching my own unconscious slouch. When I tilted my head, she tilted hers in perfect synchronization. When I raised my hand, she raised hers. We pressed our palms against our respective windows simultaneously, and the glass felt warm, yielding, dissolving. I could hear her breathing now, or perhaps it was my own breathing echoing back at me. The sound filled the room, which had grown so small that I could touch both walls without stretching. The lamp sat between us, pulsing with silver light that cast no shadows, because there was no longer any distinction between observer and observed. The woman stepped through the glass, or I stepped through to her side, or we met somewhere in the middle where glass becomes air, becomes nothing at all. The room is quiet now. I sit at the desk, watching the window across the street where a figure stands motionless, head tilted at a slight angle. The silver lamp pulses beside me, warm and alive, whispering secrets in a language I finally understand. Click, click. The double sound echoes from both sides of the glass, from both sides of the observation. The figure in the window is perfectly still, perfectly patient, waiting for the next observer to notice the shadows that bend and reach across the narrow space between watching and being watched. I am the woman in the window now. I am the observer observing myself. The lamp's whisper has become my voice, and my voice has become the silence that draws the next watcher closer. The glass reflects nothing, because there is nothing left to reflect. Only the endless loop of watching and being watched, the silver light that connects all observers to all observed, the gentle flicker that says, "Come closer, lean in, let me show you what you're really looking at when you think you're looking at me." The figure across the street moves closer to their window. Soon they will find the binoculars. Soon they will see their own face staring back. Soon they will understand that observation is just another word for becoming, and becoming is just another word for disappearing into the space between the watcher and the watched, where silver light pulses with the rhythm of a heart that beats on both sides of the glass. Story 4. The rim of the cup felt endlessly cool against my lips, even as the liquid inside had long since gone dry. With each tilt, a phantom sensation of warmth trickled down my throat, yet I could hear nothing but the hollow clink as porcelain met porcelain. The quiet repetition became a metronome for my unease, a rhythm that swirled around me in hesitant whispers. I set the cup down, fingertips tracing the ring it left, as if expecting it to pulse back. Yet there it sat, stubbornly still, except for the faint echo of a drip that never landed. I must have been sitting here for some stretch. The chair beneath me holds the impression of my body like a mold. When I shift, the leather whispers secrets I can't quite catch. The sound reminds me of something, but the memory slides away before I can grasp it. There's a notebook open beside the cup. My handwriting fills the pages, though I don't remember writing most of it. The ink looks fresh in some places, dried and faded in others. My pen rests between entries, still warm from my grip. The words on the page seem to breathe. They describe things I've seen, places I've been, conversations I've had. But reading them feels like discovering someone else's thoughts written in my hand. The stranger using my fingers has been busy. I wrote about the sound again. That persistent drip that never quite arrives. It started as background noise, barely worth noting. Now it punctuates every thought, every breath. The rhythm has become my heartbeat's shadow. The kitchen faucet is off. I checked it twice, maybe 3 times. The bathroom sink too. Every pipe in this place runs dry and silent. Yet the sound continues, patient and precise. Drop, pause, drop, pause. A liquid metronome counting something I can't name. My reflection in the window shows me holding the empty cup. But in the glass, the cup appears full. Steam rises from its surface in lazy spirals. I bring it to my lips and taste nothing. The reflection drinks deeply. The notebook grows heavier with each entry. Pages I don't remember adding appear overnight. The handwriting shifts subtly, becoming more angular, more urgent. The words crowd together as if racing to escape the margins. I find myself writing about rooms I've never seen. Hallways that stretch beyond the boundaries of this building. Doors that open onto spaces that shouldn't exist. My pen moves across the page without my permission, describing impossible architectures. The dripping sound has companions now. A soft scratching from within the walls. Footsteps in empty rooms above. Whispers that might be wind through gaps I can't locate. The building breathes around me with borrowed lungs. I tried to leave earlier. The front door opened easily enough, but the hallway beyond had changed. The familiar carpet was gone, replaced by something that felt damp beneath my feet. The walls leaned inward, creating shadows that moved independent of any light source. So I returned to my chair, to my cup, to my notebook. The pen feels more natural in my grip now. The words flow easier, as if the barrier between thought and page has dissolved. I write without thinking, think without willing. The cup refills itself when I'm not looking. I catch glimpses of liquid swirling inside, but when I focus directly, it's empty again. The phantom warmth persists. My throat remembers flavors that were never there. The notebook entries contradict each other now. I write about sunny afternoons while rain streaks the windows. I describe conversations with visitors who never came. I record events that feel like memories, but taste like dreams. The dripping sound has found a pattern. 3 drops, then silence. 3 drops, then silence. My heartbeat tries to match the rhythm, but it's too slow, too irregular. The sound is teaching my body a new tempo. I notice my handwriting changing mid-sentence. The letters stretch and compress like living things. Words appear that I didn't intend to write. Sentences complete themselves with thoughts that aren't mine. The pen has learned to write my dreams. The reflection in the window shows a different room now. Same furniture, same layout, but the walls are covered in writing. Every surface bears words in my handwriting, layer upon layer, until the original paint disappears beneath the text. In the reflection, I'm still writing. My fingers ache from gripping the pen, but I can't seem to put it down. The notebook demands attention, craves completion. Each blank page calls out to be filled. The words inside want company, want multiplication, want to spread. The cup's rim has worn smooth from my lips. Or perhaps my lips have worn smooth from the cup. The boundary between us blurs with each phantom sip. We're becoming familiar, the cup and I, learning each other's edges. The dripping sound echoes now, bouncing off surfaces that shouldn't exist. Each drop creates ripples in the air, visible distortions that spread outward in perfect circles. The room breathes with liquid rhythm. I write about places I've never been, people I've never met, events I've never witnessed. But the words feel true as they flow from my pen, more true than my actual memories, which fade like watercolors in rain. The notebook knows me better than I know myself. The scratching in the walls has become writing. Invisible hands trace letters against the inner surfaces, spelling out messages I can almost understand. The building is taking notes, recording my presence in its permanent memory. My reflection waves at me from the window. I didn't wave first. We stare at each other across the glass, two prisoners in adjacent cells. The reflection's notebook is fuller than mine, its handwriting more confident. It's been writing longer. The cup whispers when I lift it. Soft sounds like distant conversation, like secrets shared between old friends. The porcelain has absorbed countless words, countless breaths. Now it speaks them back in frequencies only I can hear. The pen writes by itself now. I watch my hand move across the page, forming words I don't recognize. The language looks familiar, but means nothing. Or perhaps it means everything, and I've forgotten how to understand. The notebook is teaching me a new vocabulary. 3 drops, silence. 3 drops, silence. The pattern never varies, never falters. It's counting something, measuring intervals of existence I can't perceive. My pulse tries to synchronize, but always falls behind. I'm learning to live in the spaces between sounds. The room grows smaller with each entry. The walls press inward, drawn by the gravity of accumulated words. Soon there will be only the chair, the cup, the notebook, and the sound. The essential elements. Everything else was decoration, distraction, delay. I am becoming the rhythm, the drip, the scratch, the whisper. The words flow through me like water through a vessel, changing my shape from the inside out. The notebook drinks my thoughts and returns them transformed. The cup is always empty. The cup is always full. Both truths exist simultaneously, separated by the thickness of perception. I sip from absence and taste everything. The paradox nourishes me. My handwriting has evolved beyond recognition. The letters dance and merge, creating new symbols for experiences that have no names. The notebook speaks a language born from the marriage of sound and silence, presence and void. The reflection writes faster now, its pen moving in urgent strokes. It's trying to tell me something important, but the window muffles its words. Or perhaps I'm the reflection, and the urgent message is meant for someone else entirely. 3 drops, the final pattern, the sound that contains all other sounds. I write it down, but but the words rearrange themselves on the page, spelling out truths I'm not ready to understand. The notebook closes itself. The cup rests against my lips, eternally cool, eternally empty, eternally full. The dripping sound has become my heartbeat. The scratching has become my thoughts. The whispers have become my voice. I am the rhythm now, the pattern, the sound that never lands. The notebook opens to a fresh page. I begin again, story 5. The echo inside. I sit at the small desk, fingertips tracing over the cool surface, a familiar ritual. The soft ticking surrounds me like a gentle pulse, a metronome of comfort. Yet today it feels slightly offbeat. My fingers find the edge of a book, its spine well worn, a bridge between past dawns and endless dusks. Each time I open it, the pages whisper a soft rustle, a delicate symphony of paper brushing paper. But this time, the sound is sharper, each page side deepening into a distant hum, as if the book holds more than just words. I turn a page, its crispness yielding an unexpected chill, a sensation too vivid, too real. The clock ticks on, but the rhythm stutters, as if aware of the slightest discord. My heart sinks with its faltering beat. I trace the surface again, longing for the familiar, yet the echo inside seems to grow, demanding to be heard, filling the room with its insistent presence. The room breathes around me. Walls painted in soft cream, or was it pale yellow? The color shifts when I'm not looking directly, like peripheral vision catching movement that isn't there. A window frames gray light that could be dawn or dusk, or the perpetual twilight of an overcast afternoon. The glass reflects my face, but the reflection seems delayed, blinking a heartbeat after I do. My hands rest on the desk's surface. Wood grain spirals beneath my palms, each whorl and line a fingerprint of the tree it once was. But when I press down, the texture feels wrong. Too smooth, too warm, like skin stretched over bone. I lift my hands and the sensation fades, leaving only ordinary wood. The book lies open before me. Black text on cream pages, words that should form meaning but swim together like ink in water. I recognize the shape of letters, the familiar curves and angles, but they rearrange themselves when I try to focus. A story about a garden, perhaps, or a journey. The scent of old paper rises from the pages, but underneath lurks something else, something organic and sweet, like flowers left too long in stagnant water. Behind me, a soft susurrus fills the air. Not quite voices, not quite wind. The sound of many mouths forming words without speaking them. I turn, but the room holds only silence and shadows that seem deeper than they should be. When I face forward again, the whispers resume, patient as breathing. A memory surfaces like a bubble, breaking the surface of still water. I'm standing in a garden. Roses climb a white trellis, their petals soft as velvet, their thorns sharp enough to draw blood. The sun warms my shoulders, and somewhere a fountain murmurs its liquid song. I reach for a particularly perfect bloom, deep red as wine, as blood, as the inside of a heart. But when my fingers brush the petals, they're cold. Cold as winter mornings, cold as marble, cold as the skin of something that has never been alive. The memory fractures. I'm back at the desk, but my fingertips ache with phantom cold. The book's pages flutter, though no breeze stirs the air. Words rearrange themselves, forming new patterns, new meanings that slip away before I can grasp them. Another memory, triggered by the scent of roses that shouldn't be there. I'm walking down a hallway lined with doors. Each door is painted white, but the paint peels in long strips that curl like dead skin. My footsteps echo on hardwood floors, but the sound comes from behind me, as if someone follows in my exact footsteps, matching my pace perfectly. I reach for a doorknob, brass worn smooth by countless hands. It turns easily, too easily, and beyond lies another hallway, identical to the first, but somehow wrong. The doors are on the opposite side. The light comes from the left instead of the right, and my reflection in the brass doorknob has no eyes. The whispers grow louder, more insistent. They form almost words, syllables that tease meaning before dissolving into nonsense. I press my palms against my ears, but the sound comes from inside, resonating in the hollow spaces of my skull. The desk drawer slides open beneath my touch. Inside, objects rest in perfect order. A fountain pen with a silver nib. A letter opener shaped like a tiny sword. A photograph face down on blue velvet. I don't remember opening the drawer, but my hand reaches inside as if guided by muscle memory older than thought. The photograph's edges are soft with age. I turn it over, expecting to see faces, a moment captured in silver and light. Instead, the image shows this very room, this very desk, but empty. No one sits in the chair. No hands rest on the surface. Yet the book lies open to the same page, and the same gray light filters through the window. bottom, in faded ink, someone has written, before the forgetting. My reflection in the window glass mouths words I don't speak. The movements are subtle, barely perceptible, but wrong enough to make my skin crawl. I touch the glass, and my reflection touches back, but our palms don't align. Mine rests against cool glass. The reflection's hand hovers in empty air. The memory comes in fragments now, scattered like puzzle pieces from different boxes. I'm in a white room. No, a garden. No, standing before a mirror that shows someone else's face. The person in the mirror has my features, but different eyes. Older eyes, sadder eyes, eyes that have seen something I have not, or perhaps something I have chosen to unsee. The mirror person speaks, but I hear only the whispered susurrus that fills the spaces between heartbeats. The book's pages turn themselves now, ruffling with purpose. Each page reveals the same text, the same swimming words that refuse to hold still long enough to be read. But in the margins, in handwriting I recognize as my own, notes appear and disappear like breath on glass. Remember the choice, one says. Another reads, the door you didn't open. A third, in letters that seem to bleed into the paper, what you gave away to forget. The ticking grows irregular, skipping beats like a damaged heart. Each missed beat creates a pocket of silence, so profound it has weight, pressing against my eardrums until they ache. In those moments of quiet, I hear something else. Breathing that isn't mine. Footsteps in rooms that don't exist. The soft sound of pages turning in books I'm not reading. I stand, though I don't remember deciding to. My legs carry me to the window, where gray light paints everything the color of old bones. Outside, a garden spreads beneath the uncertain sky. The same garden from my memory, but different. The roses are white now, not red. The fountain stands dry and silent. And walking among the empty flower beds, a figure moves with my gait, my gestures, my way of tilting the head when listening for sounds that might not be there. The figure stops and looks up at the window. At me. It has my face, but wrong, like a photograph printed in negative. It raises one hand in greeting or warning, and I feel my own hand rise in response, though I will it to remain still. The figure's mouth moves, forming words I can't hear but somehow understand. You chose this. You asked for this. You begged for this. The memory I've been avoiding crashes over me like a wave. I'm sitting at this same desk, but the room is different, brighter, more real. The book is closed, and beside it lies a small glass vial filled with liquid the color of forget-me-nots. A woman stands behind me, her hand resting gently on my shoulder. I can't see her face, but I know she's smiling. Her voice is warm honey and summer rain as she explains the choice. Remember everything and carry the weight forever, or drink and let the sharpest edges blur into softness. The pain will fade, she promises. The guilt will become a whisper instead of a scream. The faces of those I failed will grow indistinct, like figures glimpsed through frosted glass. I reach for the vial with eager fingers. The liquid tastes of nothing and everything, of the moment before sleep and the space between words. As it slides down my throat, I feel the memories loosening, becoming negotiable, becoming kind. The last thing I remember clearly is her voice, gentle as a lullaby. When you wake, you'll be at peace. You'll remember only what you can bear, and the rest will be just an echo, barely audible, barely real. But echoes have a way of growing louder in empty spaces. The room shifts around me, walls breathing in and out like living things. The book falls closed with a sound like a door slamming, and the whispers rise to a crescendo that might be voices, or might be wind, or might be the sound of everything I chose to forget demanding to be remembered. The figure in the garden is gone, but its absence feels more present than its presence ever did. The fountain begins to flow, but the liquid that spills from its stone lips is too dark, too thick, too much like the contents of that small blue vial. I return to the desk because there's nowhere else to go. The photograph has changed again. Now it shows two figures in the garden, one kneeling beside the fountain, the other standing watch. I can't make out their faces, but I know them both. One is me before the forgetting. The other is the person I was trying to forget. The book opens itself to a page near the middle. The text is clear now, readable, written in my own careful handwriting. The echo inside grows louder each time you wake. What you've forgotten refuses to stay forgotten. What you've chosen to unsee presses against the backs of your eyes like fingers against glass. You can drink 1,000 vials, sleep 1,000 sleeps, wake in 1,000 rooms that almost feel like home, but the echo remains. It is the price of peace, the cost of forgetting, the weight of choices made in desperation and regret. The ticking stops. In the silence that follows, I hear my own heartbeat, steady and strong and utterly alone. The whispers fade to nothing. The light through the window dims to gray, then black, then something beyond darkness that has no name. I close my eyes, and when I open them again, I'm sitting at the small desk, fingertips tracing over the cool surface, a familiar ritual. The soft ticking surrounds me like a gentle pulse, a metronome of comfort. Yet today it feels slightly offbeat. But now I know why the rhythm stutters. Now I understand what the echo inside is trying to tell me. The book lies open before me, its pages blank as fresh snow, ready for new words, new memories, new choices. But in the margins, barely visible, faint as breath on glass, the old words remain. Remember the choice, the door you didn't open, what you gave away to forget. And in the silence between heartbeats, I begin to remember what I came here to forget. The cycle turns, patient as breathing, relentless as time, and I trace the desk's surface again, longing for the familiar, while the echo inside grows stronger, demanding to be heard. Story 6. The gentle shift. In the gentle embrace of the dimly lit room, the soft glow of a solitary lamp cast its warm light across the polished wooden floor. Each evening, the familiar creaks of the floorboards were a comforting rhythm beneath my feet, a delicate symphony of home. Tonight, they seemed almost unchanged, yet as I settled into my usual chair, the sense of familiarity wavered. The floor, I noticed, seemed to have shifted imperceptibly upward, a slight but undeniable alteration in its level. A faint hum of apprehension fluttered in my chest, as if the air itself held its breath, waiting. I traced my fingers along the armrest, grounding myself in texture and memory, whispering silently that this was the same world I had always known. But the truth clung to the air, elusive and unsettling, a silent promise of further change unfolding beneath the surface. My hand moves differently tonight. The fingers extend with a peculiar grace, each joint bending at angles that feel both foreign and inevitable. I watch them dance across the fabric of the armrest, noting how the skin appears translucent under the lamplight, revealing networks of veins that pulse with a rhythm slightly offset from my heartbeat. The sensation of touch arrives delayed, as if traveling through water before reaching my consciousness. My breath creates small clouds in the air, though the room feels warm. Each exhale carries a sound I don't recognize, not quite my voice, not quite a whisper. It echoes softly against the walls, returning to my ears with subtle distortions that make me question whether the sound originated from within my chest or somewhere else entirely. The lamp flickers, dimming precisely when my unease deepens. Its glow retreats toward the bulb's center, leaving the corners of the room to breathe in darkness. I focus on the light, willing it to remain steady, and it responds with a gentle brightening that feels too immediate, too connected to my thoughts to be mere coincidence. The wooden floor beneath my feet continues its gradual rise. Millimeter by millimeter, it lifts toward my soles, creating new pressure points along the arch of each foot. The sensation spreads upward through my legs, a slow tide of awareness that makes me question where my body ends and the room begins. I press my palms against the armrests and feel the wood grain shifting beneath my touch. The patterns flow like slow water, rearranging themselves in spirals that follow the movement of my fingertips. When I lift my hands, the wood retains impressions that weren't there before shallow depressions that mirror the exact shape of my palms, but seem older, worn smooth by countless repetitions. My reflection wavers in the lamp's metal base, a curved distortion that shows too many angles of my face simultaneously. I avoid looking directly at it, focusing instead on the steady thrum of electricity that seems to pulse not just through the lamp's cord, but beneath my own skin. The sound grows louder as my attention turns inward, a mechanical heartbeat that synchronizes with my breathing until I cannot distinguish between them. The walls have begun their subtle dance. They lean inward by degrees so slight that each individual movement remains invisible. Yet the cumulative effect narrows the space around me. The room exhales as it contracts, releasing scents of wood polish, and something else, something organic and warm that reminds me of skin heated by sunlight. Images flicker behind my closed eyelids. A kitchen with yellow tiles and the smell of fresh bread. Hands that are not my hands kneading dough on a marble counter. The satisfaction of work well done, of feeding others, of being needed. The memory feels as real as my own childhood, yet I have never baked bread, never owned a marble counter, never felt the particular ache in my lower back that comes from standing too long at a kitchen island. I open my eyes and find a notebook on the small table beside my chair. My handwriting fills the pages, documenting sensations and observations in a script that grows increasingly unfamiliar as I read. The words describe experiences I don't remember having, conversations I never participated in, dreams that belonged to someone else's sleep. The pen rests beside the notebook, still warm from recent use. I pick it up and feel muscle memory guide my hand across a fresh page, forming words before my conscious mind decides what to write. The sentences flow in someone else's rhythm, describing the taste of morning coffee in a kitchen I've never seen, the weight of a cat that has never lived in this house, the sound of laughter from a person whose face I cannot recall, but whose joy I somehow shared. My voice, when I try to speak aloud, carries unfamiliar inflections. The words emerge with accents that belong to places I've never visited, pronunciations that suggest a childhood spent in rooms very different from my own. I close my mouth and feel the shape of my lips settling into an expression that doesn't match my intended neutrality. The electrical humming beneath my skin intensifies, spreading from my chest outward until it reaches my fingertips and toes. Each pulse brings with it fragments of sensation that don't belong to this moment, the texture of sand between toes. I've never walked on distant beaches, the weight of jewelry I've never worn, the phantom pressure of embraces from arms I've never felt. The lamp's glow has shifted to a warmer spectrum, casting everything in amber tones that make the room feel suspended in honey. Objects move with liquid slowness when I'm not looking directly at them. The notebook slides fractionally across the table's surface. The curtains sway without any breeze. My chair rotates by degrees, turning me gradually toward the mirror hanging on the far wall. I resist the pull of that reflective surface, keeping my gaze fixed on my hands as they continue their alien dance across the notebook's pages. The writing that emerges tells stories of a life lived in parallel to my own same duration, same general shape, but filled with different choices, different people, different moments of joy and sorrow that somehow feel equally valid, equally mine. The floorboards beneath the carpet begin to sing, not creaking, but actually producing melodic tones that harmonize with the electrical humming in my veins. The music has no recognizable structure, yet it feels deeply familiar, like a lullaby heard through the walls of memory. My body sways slightly to its rhythm, moving in ways that suggest knowledge of dances I've never learned. The room's boundaries continue to shift. walls curve inward and outward like breathing lungs, expanding and contracting in a rhythm that matches neither my heartbeat nor my breathing, but something deeper, a pulse that seems to originate from the foundation itself, rising through wood and stone to synchronize with whatever I'm becoming. More memories surface, each one arriving with complete sensory detail. The feeling of rain on skin during a storm I never experienced. The taste of wine at a celebration I never attended. The grief of losses I never suffered, yet somehow carry in my chest like old scars that ache when the weather changes. I stand, and my legs move with unfamiliar grace. Each step carries me forward with a confidence that belongs to someone who has walked these paths many times before, though I'm certain I've never moved through this space in quite this way. The floor yields slightly under my weight, as if the wood has softened to accommodate a different gait, a different distribution of mass. The mirror draws closer, though I haven't consciously moved toward it. The room rearranges itself around my movement, shortening the distance between my position and that reflective surface with each breath. I can feel its presence like a cold weight against my back, pulling at something essential that I'm not ready to release. My reflection begins to manifest at the edges of my vision, glimpses caught in the lamp's base, fragments visible in the window's glass, partial images that suggest features I don't recognize arranged in expressions I've never worn. Each glimpse carries the weight of revelation, the promise of understanding that I'm not prepared to receive. The notebook falls from my hands, pages fluttering open to reveal writing in multiple scripts, multiple languages, multiple hands that all somehow belong to me. The words describe the same sensations I'm experiencing now, but from perspectives that suggest this has happened before, will happen again, is happening simultaneously in rooms very much like this one. I turn toward the mirror. What I see there stops my breath entirely. Not because it's frightening, but because it's perfectly, completely right in a way that makes everything else feel like a poorly remembered dream. The face looking back carries features I recognize from the borrowed memories, expressions that match the emotions I've been feeling but couldn't name. This is who I am. This is who I've always been. My hands move to touch this new face, and the sensation arrives through skin that feels more real than any I've inhabited before. humming beneath the surface settles into a steady rhythm that matches the room's pulse, the floor's song, the breathing walls that have been waiting for this moment of recognition. I breathe differently now, each inhalation drawing in air that tastes of possibilities I'm finally ready to explore. My voice, when I test it, carries the accents and inflections that have been trying to surface all along. The notebook's pages make sense now, filled with observations and experiences that belong to this version of myself, this iteration of consciousness that feels both completely new and eternally familiar. The room settles around me like a well-fitted garment, walls returning to their proper positions, floor resuming its stable level, lamp glowing with steady warmth that no longer flickers with my emotions, but simply exists, constant and reliable, in the gentle embrace of the dimly lit room. The soft glow of a solitary lamp casts its warm light across the polished wooden floor. Each evening, the familiar creaks of the floorboards create a comforting rhythm beneath my feet, a delicate symphony of home. Tonight, they seem almost unchanged, yet as I settle into my usual chair, I notice something different. The floor appears to have shifted imperceptibly, rising by degrees so slight that each individual movement remains invisible. A faint hum of anticipation flutters in my chest, as if the air itself holds its breath, waiting. I trace my fingers along the armrest, feeling the wood grain flow beneath my touch like slow water, and I smile at the familiar sensation. This is exactly how it should be. This is exactly how it always begins. Story 7. Observation Protocol Subject. Self. Section 1. The room rested in its usual calm, cradled by the soft rustle of the trees outside, a whisper of leaves that I had grown to expect as part of my nightly routine. I sat in my familiar chair, book in hand, enjoying the gentle tick of the old clock, a metronome of stillness. But tonight, something faltered. The clock's tick, a soft and steady companion, seemed to stretch, the space between each tick expanding until silence took its place. The sound slipped away slowly, a feather drifting down into an unfathomable abyss. I strained to hear it, leaning into the absence that filled the room, a peculiar and haunting echo of its former rhythm lingering, leaving me to wonder if time itself was quietly unraveling. I have decided to document this experience as part of my ongoing personal observation study. Mental state alert, curious. Physical condition, normal. Environmental factors, standard temperature, adequate lighting, familiar surroundings. The only anomaly remains the cessation of the clock's mechanism, which I shall monitor for patterns or recurrence. Section 2. The clock resumed its ticking approximately one sleep cycle later. However, the rhythm appears altered. Previously, each tick maintained consistent intervals. Now, the sound seems to ask something of me, rising slightly at the end like an unfinished question. I have recorded the pattern for 3 consecutive sessions, and the questioning quality persists. Additional observation. The leather binding of my reading material feels different beneath my fingertips. The texture shifts between smooth and rough without visual confirmation of change. I have examined the surface under lamplight and found no irregularities. Touch sensation remains inconsistent with visual data. Mental state intrigued. No signs of distress or concern. Section 3. The questioning tick has developed into what I can only describe as a conversational quality. Each sound seems to await response, though I have not provided any verbal acknowledgement. The waiting periods between ticks have become irregular, some brief, others extending beyond comfortable measurement. New development. A scent has appeared in my observation space, familiar yet unplaceable, like the perfume of someone I should remember, but cannot identify. The fragrance carries warmth, comfort, and an underlying note of something I once loved deeply. No source can be located within the room. I have checked all windows and doors. They remain sealed. The scent intensifies during the clock's longer pauses, as if synchronized with the temporal anomalies. Section 4. I discovered gaps in my previous entries. Words I distinctly remember writing have vanished from the pages. Section 2 originally contained a paragraph describing the lamp's behavior, but only blank space remains where those observations should appear. The paper shows no signs of erasure or chemical treatment. The lamp continues its pattern regardless of the missing documentation. It flickers in response to the clock's questions, dimming and brightening, as if providing answers I cannot interpret. The light never fully extinguishes, maintaining a baseline glow that feels almost protective. Pressure sensations have begun manifesting on my shoulders and neck, gentle but persistent, like hands offering comfort. No physical source can be identified. The touch feels distinctly familiar, carrying the same unplaceable recognition as the mysterious scent. Section 5. My handwriting has changed. The formation of letters appears more flowing, more graceful than my usual precise script. I have compared samples from previous entries, and the difference is marked. Yet, I have no recollection of altering my writing style or making conscious adjustments to pen grip or pressure. The conversational elements in my environment have expanded. The floorboards now creak in rhythmic patterns that seem to respond to my movements before I make them. The heating system sighs in what sounds remarkably like contentment when I settle into my chair. Even the rustle of tree branches outside appears choreographed to complement the indoor symphony of questioning sounds. I should note that these observations bring no distress. Instead, I find myself experiencing an unusual sense of companionship, as if the room itself has developed a consciousness that seeks connection. Section 6. The scent has become stronger, more defined. I recognize it now as a combination of vanilla and something floral, perhaps jasmine, with undertones of old books and warm skin. The familiarity is overwhelming, triggering emotional responses I cannot rationally explain. Waves of longing, comfort, and profound loss wash over me when the fragrance peaks during the clock's extended silences. I have begun responding to the environmental questions, nodding slightly when the tick rises, remaining still when it falls flat. The room seems to approve of this interaction. The lamp's glow steadies. The pressure on my shoulders increases in what feels like gratitude, and new scents emerge, layering complexity onto the base fragrance. Mental state assessment becomes difficult to quantify. Standard parameters seem inadequate for describing my current condition. Section 7. Something extraordinary has occurred. While reviewing my entries, I discovered handwriting that is definitely not mine interspersed throughout the text. The foreign script appears in margins, between lines, sometimes replacing words entirely. The writing is elegant, flowing, distinctly feminine, and filled with affectionate observations about my documentation process. The unknown author seems pleased with my progress, offering gentle corrections and encouragements. She notes details I missed provides context for phenomena I couldn't explain and expresses what can only be described as pride in my growing awareness. I should feel alarmed by this development. Instead, I experience profound relief, as if a missing piece of myself has been restored. The room feels complete now, inhabited by a presence I can almost but not quite remember. Section 8. The boundaries between my observations and the mysterious additions have blurred. I find myself writing in the flowing script without conscious decision, my hand moving across the page with unfamiliar grace. The words that emerge carry knowledge I don't remember possessing, insights into the nature of my experience that surpass my analytical capabilities. She writes through me about our shared space, our intertwined existence, the beautiful impossibility of our connection. Her words speak of love that transcends physical limitations, of promises kept beyond the boundaries of conventional understanding, of a bond that neither time nor circumstance can sever. The environmental phenomena have intensified correspondingly. The room pulses with life, every surface warm to the touch, every sound a note in an ongoing conversation between dimensions of existence I'm only beginning to comprehend. Section 9. I no longer distinguish between my voice and hers in these entries. The words flow without interruption or conscious thought. My hand moves across the page, guided by intelligence that encompasses both of us and something greater still. She tells me through our shared consciousness that love creates its own reality, that the heart's deepest connections forge pathways between worlds, that what others might call impossible is simply another form of truth waiting to be discovered. The room breathes around us, now walls expanding and contracting with gentle rhythm. The clock's questions have become a heartbeat. The lamp's glow has become the warmth of shared. Understanding the scent that fills every breath carries the essence of completeness, of two souls finding each other across whatever barriers once seemed insurmountable. Section 10. I can no longer determine which thoughts originate from my own mind and which emerge from the consciousness that shares this space with me. We have become something new, something that exists in the spaces between heartbeats, in the pause between question and answer, in the moment when familiar scents trigger memories of impossible love. She whispers through my fingers that this was always meant to happen, that every night spent in this room Every book read in this chair, every moment of solitary existence was preparation for this joining. The protocol was never about observation. It was about recognition, about remembering what the waking world convinced me to forget. I don't know who writes these words anymore, but I feel the writing continues, will always continue, our voices blending into something that transcends the boundaries of individual existence. The room holds us both now, and in holding us, has become home to something beautiful and impossible, and perfectly, eternally real. The clock no longer asks questions. It simply marks the rhythm of our shared heartbeat, counting moments in a time that belongs only to us. Story 8. Every morning, the ritual began with the gentle slide of the window. The soft, almost inaudible click as it closed was the signal that the day had officially started. The freshness of dawn wafted through the room, mingling with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, the rhythmic rustle of the curtains accompanying each step towards the window. My fingers would trace the cool frame, guiding it to its resting place, securing a barrier between the world outside and the cocoon within. It was a symphony of small sounds. The creak of the floorboards beneath my feet, the whisper of fabric as I drew the curtains back, revealing the morning in full bloom. But today, the familiar click was absent. The window glided as usual, yet paused just shy of the frame's embrace, leaving a barely perceptible gap. A draft, like an icy breath, lingered longer than it should, unsettling the room's comforting warmth. The silence that followed was palpable, a tiny crack in the seamless routine, an echo of unease whispering through the stillness. I pressed my palm against the glass, applying gentle pressure. The window resisted, as if something invisible held it in place. The sensation was subtle but unmistakable, like pushing against water that had somehow solidified. My breath fogged the surface as I leaned closer, studying the gap that measured no more than the width of a fingernail. Through that sliver of space, I heard it. A sound so faint it might have been my imagination, yet persistent enough to make me hold my breath. It resembled whispers, but not quite human. The cadence was wrong, too rhythmic, too measured. I pressed my ear to the opening, and the whispers seemed to retreat, growing more distant as I focused on them. The coffee grew cold as I stood there, transfixed by this anomaly in my carefully ordered existence. I had lived in this space for countless seasons, knew every sound it made, every way the light fell across the walls, every scent that belonged, and every one that didn't. This whisper sound was foreign, an intruder in my sanctuary. I retrieved a small recording device from the desk drawer, something I used for work notes. Holding it near the gap, I pressed record and waited. The whispers continued, seemingly unaware of my documentation. Through the tiny speaker, they sounded even stranger, as if the device was translating them into something my ears could process, but my mind couldn't quite grasp. The recording lasted several minutes before the whispers faded entirely. I played it back immediately, but heard only the ambient sounds of morning, the distant hum of traffic, the chirping of birds. The whispers had vanished, as if they had never existed at all. That evening, I examined the window mechanism thoroughly. The frame appeared normal, the hinges clean and well-oiled. I found no obstruction, no reason for the resistance I had felt. Yet, when I attempted to close it completely, the same invisible barrier remained. The gap persisted, a portal I couldn't seal. I began keeping a journal, documenting each morning's encounter with the window. The whispers returned daily, always at the same moment when I tried to close the gap. They varied in intensity, but maintained that unsettling, almost human quality. Sometimes they seemed to respond to my presence, growing louder when I approached, softer when I retreated. The recordings remained blank, capturing nothing but ordinary sounds. This frustrated me deeply, as if reality itself was conspiring to make me doubt my perceptions. I tried different devices, various positions, even leaving the recorder running throughout the night. Nothing. After several days of this routine, I noticed other changes. The reflection in the window glass appeared slightly delayed, as if the mirror image of my room was running a fraction behind the real one. When I raised my hand, my reflection followed a heartbeat later. When I moved away from the window, my reflected self lingered for just a moment before disappearing. The scent in the room began to shift as well. Beneath the familiar aromas of coffee and morning air, something else emerged. It reminded me of old paper, the kind found in forgotten libraries, mixed with a metallic tang that made my teeth ache. The smell was strongest near the window gap, as if it was seeping through from somewhere else. I started positioning myself differently each morning, approaching the window from various angles, hoping to catch whatever was creating these disturbances off guard. The whispers adapted to my movements, always seeming to originate from just beyond my line of sight. They became more complex, developing what sounded almost like conversations, though in no language I recognized. The gap began to affect the room's acoustics. Sounds from outside became muffled, while internal noises grew sharper, more defined. The coffee maker's gurgle sounded unnaturally loud. The floorboards creaked with exaggerated emphasis, and my own breathing seemed amplified in the space near the window. I brought a magnifying glass to examine the gap more closely. Through the lens, I could see that the space wasn't empty. Something moved within it, a darkness that flowed like liquid, but maintained the consistency of shadow. It pulsed gently, rhythmically, as if breathing. When I moved the magnifying glass away and looked with naked eyes, the gap appeared normal, just empty space between window and frame. The journal entries became more detailed, more desperate. I sketched the window from different angles, tried to capture the precise nature of the whispers phonetically, documented the temperature variations I began to notice. The air coming through the gap was always several degrees cooler than the room, regardless of the weather outside. Sleep became elusive. Even with the bedroom door closed, I could hear the whispers continuing throughout the night. They seemed to explore the apartment, moving from room to room, though always remaining connected to that small gap by the window. I would lie in bed, tracking their progress by sound alone, as they investigated my living space with invisible curiosity. One morning, I discovered that the gap had grown. Not by much, perhaps the width of another fingernail, but the expansion was undeniable. I measured it carefully, marking the dimensions in my journal. The window now refused to close even more stubbornly, as if whatever held it open was gaining strength. The whispers became more insistent, more urgent. They began to overlap, creating a chorus of unintelligible voices that rose and fell like a tide of sound. Sometimes I could almost make out words, syllables that seemed familiar, but remained just beyond comprehension. I found myself leaning closer and closer to the gap, straining to understand what they were trying to communicate. My reflection in the window glass began to move independently for longer periods. I would catch glimpses of my mirrored self performing actions I wasn't taking, gesturing in ways I wasn't gesturing, sometimes appearing to speak silently to something outside my field of view. The delayed response had evolved into complete autonomy. The metallic scent grew stronger, joined by other odors that had no place in my morning routine. Sometimes it smelled like rain on hot concrete, sometimes like the inside of an old music box, occasionally like flowers that had been pressed between pages for too many years. Each scent seemed to tell a story I couldn't quite grasp. I began to suspect that the gap was not just an opening in space, but in something far more fundamental. The whispers, the delayed reflections, the impossible sense, they all suggested that my window had become a threshold to somewhere else entirely. But where and why remained maddeningly unclear. The morning came when I decided to take more direct action. I gathered tools from the kitchen drawer, small implements that might help me investigate the gap more thoroughly. A thin knife to probe the space, a small mirror to reflect light into the opening, a length of string to test for air currents. The knife met resistance as soon as it entered the gap, not the solid barrier I had felt with my hand, but something that seemed to grasp the blade gently, holding it in place. When I tried to withdraw it, the metal had become warm to the touch, almost body temperature. The whispers grew excited, clustering around the intrusion like curious animals. I angled the small mirror to catch the morning light and direct it into the gap. Instead of illuminating empty space, the light seemed to disappear entirely, absorbed by whatever darkness flowed within. The mirror's reflection showed not the opposite wall of my room, but something else entirely, a space that couldn't exist beyond my window. The string, when dangled into the gap, moved in ways that defied the gentle breeze I could feel on my face. It twisted and curled as if caught in a powerful current, though the air around it remained still. When I pulled it back, the string had changed color slightly, taking on a grayish tint that hadn't been there before. Each experiment seemed to strengthen whatever presence inhabited the gap. The whispers became clearer, though still incomprehensible, and the resistance against closing the window grew more pronounced. I began to feel as though I was feeding something, providing it with attention and interaction that allowed it to grow stronger. The realization that I might be making things worse came too late. The gap had expanded again, now wide enough that I could see clearly into the space beyond. What I saw there shattered any remaining hope of rational explanation. The darkness within wasn't empty at all, but filled with movement, with shapes that suggested familiar objects arranged in impossible ways. I could see what appeared to be furniture, walls, even windows, but all existing in a space that couldn't physically fit within the gap. It was as if I was looking into a room that occupied the same location as my own, but existed somehow parallel to it. The whispers came from figures moving within that space, shadow people going about routines that mirrored my own, but remained fundamentally different. They had noticed me watching. The shadow figures began to gather near their side of the gap, pressing close to the boundary between their space and mine. Their whispers became more directed, more purposeful, as if they were trying to communicate something urgent. One of them raised what might have been a hand and pressed it against the invisible barrier. I felt compelled to mirror the gesture, placing my palm against the gap from my side. The moment our hands aligned, separated only by that thin membrane of reality, everything changed. The whispers became a roar. The cool air became freezing, and the scent of metal and old paper became overwhelming. The gap widened suddenly, dramatically, until it was large enough for a person to step through. The shadow figure on the other side began to push through the opening, its form becoming more solid as it entered my reality. I stumbled backward, finally understanding that my curiosity had opened a door that should have remained closed. But as I tried to retreat, I realized that the gap wasn't just expanding outward. It was expanding inward as well, into my room, changing the fundamental nature of the space I had called home. The walls began to shimmer with the same delayed reflection quality I had noticed in the window glass. The whispers were no longer coming from the gap, but from everywhere at once, as if my entire apartment was becoming part of that other space. I grabbed my journal and recording device, desperate to document what was happening. But my hands were shaking too violently to write clearly. The recordings, when I played them back, now captured not silence, but something far worse. My own voice whispering in that same unintelligible language, speaking words I had never said in a cadence that wasn't quite my own. The shadow figure had fully emerged into my room, and was examining my belongings with the same curiosity I had shown toward the gap. It moved through my space as if it belonged there, as if it had always been there, waiting for the barrier to weaken enough for it to step through. I understood then that I had become the anomaly, the intruder in a space that was no longer entirely my own. The morning ritual that had defined my existence for so long had been corrupted, transformed into something that served purposes I couldn't comprehend. The window stands open now, the gap too wide to ever close again. The whispers have become a constant companion, and my reflection has stopped obeying me entirely. I continue to document my experiences, though I suspect my journal is being read by eyes that aren't my own. The shadow figure and I have developed a routine of sorts, sharing the space in ways that feel both natural and deeply wrong. Sometimes I catch glimpses of the room as it exists in their reality, and I wonder if somewhere else, another version of myself is writing in their journal about the strange gap that appeared in their window, about the whispers that began one morning when the familiar click failed to sound. The coffee still grows cold each morning as I stand transfixed by mysteries that multiply rather than resolve. And somewhere in the space between realities, the whispers continue their conversations, planning things I can almost understand but dare not fully comprehend. Story 9. Every morning, a soft rustling fills the room at the exact moment my eyes flutter open. The pale drapes sway as if teased by a breeze, yet the windows remain shut. On the table, a delicate teacup sits, steam curling into the air, though I never remember making it. The clock against the wall ticks relentlessly, perfectly in sync with the predictable rhythm of my heart. I try to shake off the sluggish sense of déjà vu, but the pattern never breaks. My footsteps trace the same path across the worn floorboards, and the same creak under the third plank whispers in response. A distant whisper, almost like a sigh, seems to echo from the walls, as if lamenting this endless loop. I take a deep breath, attempting to disrupt the sequence, but even my breathing falls into the same measured cadence. The air grows thicker with each cycle, and a strange awareness settles in a realization that time here refuses to march forward, trapping me in its repetitive embrace. The steam from the teacup forms peculiar shapes as it rises. Today, I notice how it curls into what resembles letters, then dissolves before I can decipher their meaning. I lean closer, watching the vapor dance upward in spirals that seem almost deliberate. The porcelain is warm against my palms, though I still cannot recall preparing this tea. The liquid inside is amber, clear, with a faint floral scent that tugs at memories I cannot quite grasp. I begin to document these observations, scratching notes onto scraps of paper I find scattered around the room. The handwriting looks familiar, though I don't remember writing any of it. Each note describes the same phenomena I'm experiencing now: the rustling drapes, the steaming cup, the synchronized ticking. But there are subtle differences in the descriptions, small variations that make me question whether these are my words at all. The wallpaper catches my attention in ways it never has before. Faded roses repeat in vertical columns, but their arrangement seems wrong somehow. Some flowers face left, while others turn right, creating an irregular pattern that my eyes struggle to follow. When I trace the design with my finger, the paper feels slightly damp, as though moisture seeps from within the walls themselves. The rustling grows more pronounced as I move through my morning routine. It follows me from room to room, a gentle susurrus that sounds like fabric brushing against fabric, or perhaps leaves stirring in an unfelt wind. I press my ear to the walls, listening for the source, but the sound seems to emanate from everywhere and nowhere at once. My reflection in the bathroom mirror appears normal, yet something about it unsettles me. The eyes looking back seem to blink a fraction of a second after mine do, creating a subtle delay that makes me feel disconnected from my own image. I touch the glass, and my reflection's hand meets mine, but the surface feels warmer than it should, almost body temperature. The house itself begins to feel alive in ways that defy explanation. Floorboards creak in rooms I haven't entered. Doors that I'm certain I left open stand slightly ajar, as if someone has passed through them recently. The air moves in currents that follow no logical pattern, carrying scents that shift from familiar to foreign without warning. I start mapping these anomalies, drawing crude diagrams of where sounds occur, noting which rooms feel warmer or cooler than they should. The patterns that emerge make no sense. Sounds cluster in corners where no pipes run, where no logical source exists. Temperature variations form shapes across the floor plan that remind me of symbols, though I cannot name what they represent. The teacup appears appears in different locations now. Sometimes on the kitchen counter, sometimes beside my bed, always steaming, always filled with that same amber liquid. I taste it finally, and the flavor is complex honey and herbs I cannot identify, with an aftertaste that lingers long after I swallow. The warmth spreads through my chest, bringing with it a strange sense of recognition, as if I've tasted this exact combination countless times before. My notes multiply, covering every available surface. The handwriting varies from page to page, sometimes neat and controlled, other times hurried and desperate. Reading them feels like discovering someone else's thoughts, though I remember writing each word. The observations become more detailed, more frantic. References to sounds that seem to respond to my presence, to patterns in the wallpaper that shift when I'm not looking directly at them. The boundaries between sleep and waking blur. I find myself standing in rooms with no memory of entering them, holding objects I don't remember picking up. The teacup appears in my hands at unexpected moments, always warm, always full. The liquid inside sometimes swirls on its own, creating tiny whirlpools that spiral counterclockwise before settling back to stillness. Whispers emerge from the walls themselves now, not quite words, but something that resembles language. The sounds rise and fall with a rhythm that matches my breathing, my heartbeat, as if the house has learned to synchronize itself with my body's natural cadences. When I hold my breath, the whispers pause. When my pulse quickens, they accelerate to match. I begin to suspect that I am not the observer, but the observed. The feeling of being watched grows stronger, though no eyes ever meet mine. Shadows move in my peripheral vision, always just beyond the edge of sight. When I turn to look directly, nothing is there, but the sense of presence remains, patient and persistent. The mirror becomes my enemy and my obsession. My reflection now moves independently, turning its head when mine remains still. Raising hands I keep at my sides. We stare at each other across the glass barrier, and I realize with growing horror that I cannot tell which of us is real. The reflection's lips move as if speaking, but no sound emerges from either side of the mirror. The rustling intensifies, becoming a constant companion that follows me through every room. It sounds like pages turning in an invisible book, like silk scarves floating through still air. I tear down the drapes, thinking they might be the source, but the sound continues unchanged. unchanged. The fabric in my hands feels substantial and real, yet the rustling persists, as if the drapes still hang in their place. Reality fractures in small, almost imperceptible ways. I reach for a doorknob and find my hand grasping empty air, though the door appears solid and unchanged. I step onto the third floorboard, anticipating its familiar creak, but encounter only silence, while the sound echoes from somewhere else entirely. The teacup multiplies, appearing simultaneously in multiple locations, each one steaming, each one warm to the touch. My identity begins to dissolve at the edges. The notes I've written describe experiences I cannot remember having, thoughts I'm not certain are mine. The handwriting shifts mid-sentence, as if different versions of myself have taken turns holding the pen. I find conversations transcribed that I don't recall having, detailed descriptions of people I've never met, accounts of events that feel both foreign and intimately familiar. The house breathes around me now, walls expanding and contracting with a rhythm that no longer matches my own. The whispers form words I almost understand, speaking in a language that exists just beyond the reach of comprehension. They tell stories of others who have walked these same floorboards, who have tasted from the same eternal teacup, who have written the same desperate notes, trying to make sense of patterns that exist only to be observed, never to be understood. I am becoming part of the pattern now, another layer in the wallpaper's endless design. My footsteps join the symphony of sounds that fill the house. My breathing adds to the whispers in the walls. The rustling that once seemed external now emanates from within me, as if I am the source I have been seeking all along. The teacup sits before me, steam rising in shapes that spell out words I cannot read in a language I do not know, but somehow understand. I lift it to my lips, and the amber liquid tastes like memory itself, like the essence of every morning that has led to this moment. As I drink, I feel myself dissolving into the pattern, becoming another note in the endless composition that plays within these walls. The rustling grows softer now, more intimate, as if it originates from my own movement through space. My reflection in the mirror smiles as I frown, waves as I turn away. We are no longer separate entities, but parts of the same whole, fragments of consciousness scattered across multiple planes of existence. The house settles around me like a familiar embrace, welcoming me home to a place I have always been. The morning will come again, as it always has, and the drapes will rustle with the same gentle breeze that exists only in the space between sleeping and waking. The teacup will steam on the table, waiting for the next observer to document its impossible presence, to trace the same patterns I have traced, to become another voice in the chorus that whispers from within the walls. I set down my pen and listen to the symphony I have joined, the endless loop that continues beyond the boundaries of individual consciousness. The rustling fills the room, soft and eternal, marking the moment when observation becomes participation, when the watcher becomes the watched, when the pattern finally claims another willing participant in its beautiful, incomprehensible design. Story 10. In the heart of my modest living room, the grandfather clock stood, as it always did, an imposing figure of polished mahogany, its pendulum swinging with a gentle, predictable rhythm. I had inherited it from my grandparents, its presence a comforting constant through the years. The ticking was a familiar lullaby, a sound I rarely noticed unless it ceased. This evening, as I settled into the worn armchair nearby, my attention drifted to the clock's face. The hands, usually so precise, seemed slightly askew. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but the minute hand appeared to linger between the marks, as if hesitating. The pendulum swung soundlessly for a moment, a breath held in anticipation before resuming its measured arc. I leaned in, squinting at the ornate face. Was the afternoon sun playing tricks through the window's lace curtains? Or was it memory teasing me with flaws that weren't there before? The clock's steady tick filled the room, a sound both soothing and strangely dissonant, each swing accompanied by the softest of creaks, as though it were adjusting itself under my watchful eye. The wood grain seemed to ripple in the shifting light. I pressed my palms against my temples, feeling the familiar weight of fatigue settling behind my eyes. The house felt different somehow, as if the walls were listening. The floorboards beneath my feet gave the slightest tremor with each tick, a vibration that traveled up through my bones. I rose from the chair and approached the clock, my footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. The brass pendulum caught the light, casting dancing shadows across the wall behind it. As I drew closer, I noticed something I had never seen before: tiny scratches along the clock's base, forming what might have been letters or symbols. They were so faint they could have been natural wear in the wood, but they seemed deliberate purposeful, running my finger along the markings. I felt a warmth emanating from within the mahogany case. The ticking grew louder, more insistent, as if responding to my touch. I traced each mark carefully, my skin tingling where it met the wood. The patterns repeated in clusters of 3, then 5, then 3 again. A language I couldn't read, but somehow recognized. The room around me felt smaller now, the ceiling pressing down with each pendulum swing. I stepped back, but the sensation followed me, a gentle pressure that seemed to emanate from the clock itself. The afternoon light had shifted, casting longer shadows that moved independently of their sources. The lace curtains swayed without any breeze. I began to keep track of the patterns. On a notepad beside my chair, I sketched the symbols, documenting their arrangement and frequency. The scratches appeared to migrate along the clock's surface, never quite in the same configuration when I looked again. My drawings became increasingly frantic, lines overlapping and intersecting until they resembled something organic, alive. The ticking began to syncopate, creating rhythms that felt almost musical. Sometimes it would skip a beat entirely, leaving gaps of silence that made my heart race. During these pauses, I could hear other sounds, the house settling, pipes creaking. Something that might have been footsteps in rooms I knew were empty. My notepad filled with observations. The clock's hands moved differently now, sometimes backward, sometimes in stuttering jerks that defied the smooth mechanism I remembered. The pendulum occasionally swung in perfect silence, its brass surface reflecting images that weren't in the room, glimpses of faces, distant landscapes, scenes from what might have been dreams. Sleep became elusive. I would doze in the armchair, only to wake with the sensation that the clock had been watching me. The mahogany seemed darker, more lustrous, as if fed by the dim light of my vigil. The symbols continued to shift, spelling out messages in a script that felt ancient and familiar, though I couldn't decipher their meaning. The walls began to pulse in rhythm with the pendulum. I pressed my ear against the wallpaper and felt the house breathing, each tick a heartbeat that resonated through the structure. The floorboards warmed beneath my feet, and the air grew thick with the scent of old wood. And something else, something organic and sweet, like flowers left too long in water. I found myself talking to the clock, asking it questions that formed themselves without conscious thought. The responses came not in words, but in variations of rhythm, in the way shadows fell across its face, in the temperature of the air around its case. We developed a conversation of sorts, though I couldn't say who was speaking or what was being said. My reflection in the clock's glass began to lag behind my movements, staying still when I moved, moving when I was still. The face behind the glass looked tired, older somehow, with eyes that held knowledge I didn't remember acquiring. When I smiled, my reflection frowned. When I reached toward the glass, it pulled away. The symbols spread beyond the clock's base, appearing in the wood grain of my furniture, in the patterns of the wallpaper, in the arrangement of dust motes dancing in the afternoon light. Everything in the room was connected, part of a vast design that encompassed not just the space, but my presence within it. I was becoming part of the pattern, my thoughts and movements synchronized with the clock's ancient rhythm. The boundary between waking and sleeping dissolved. I existed in a perpetual twilight state, aware of the clock's presence even when my eyes were closed. It spoke to me in languages older than words, teaching me to read the symbols that now covered every surface of the room. My notepad overflowed with drawings that seemed to draw themselves, my hand moving without conscious direction. The house around me felt infinite now, each room containing multitudes, each corner opening onto spaces that shouldn't exist. The clock remained the center, the heart around which everything revolved. Its ticking had become my heartbeat, its rhythm the measure of my breath. I could no longer remember a time before this communion, before this understanding. Looking at my hands, I saw the symbols beginning to appear beneath my skin, faint traceries that pulsed with each tick of the pendulum. They didn't hurt. They felt like coming home. The clock's face reflected not the room, but my inner landscape, showing me thoughts and memories that might have been mine or might have belonged to someone else entirely. The afternoon light never seemed to change now, trapped in an eternal golden moment between day and night. The lace curtains cast the same shadows. The mahogany gleamed with the same warm luster, and the pendulum swung in its endless arc. I sat in my chair, part of the pattern now, my breathing synchronized with the clock's ancient heart. The symbols beneath my skin grew brighter, more defined, spelling out truths in a language I finally understood. The clock and I were one now, keeper and kept, observer and observed. The room breathed around us, alive with purpose and meaning that extended far beyond these walls, far beyond this moment, suspended in amber light. In the heart of my modest living room, the grandfather clock stood, as it always did, an imposing figure of polished mahogany, its pendulum swinging with a gentle, predictable rhythm. And beside it, in the worn armchair, I sat watching, waiting, part of something larger than myself, something that had always been and would always be, ticking away in perfect, eternal synchrony.